this is Roger Green, host of the Surfing the NASH Tsunami podcast. This weekend, we are offering 5 conversations from Season 3, Episode 19, celebrating our second anniversary with new news about SurfingTheNASH.com and Year 3 of Surfing the NASH Tsunami, followed by discussion of the retrospective analysis of NAIL-NIT. This conversation starts with the news that Stephen Harrison will be stepping back as full-time co-host in recognition of his schedule, and that Jörn Schattenberg, heretofore our 5th Beatle, will be assuming full-time responsibilities. Starting this week, Stephen's target will be to join half our episodes. The rest of the conversation has Jörn, Louise Campbell, Mazen Noureddin, Naim, Alkhouri, and me discussing our history of the project, how we feel the first 2 years of the project have gone, what we envision for the future, coupled with an appreciation of everything Stephen has meant to the podcast to date and to the entire profession of NAFL drug development. If you want to have fun, stop this podcast before you listen further and join the Stephen Harrison drinking game. Get a cup of black coffee, hot or iced, add a non-dairy milk or low-glycemic sweetener index if you need, and write down your favorite Stephen Harrison phrase, what we call Harrisonisms. Then listen to see whether you've matched any of us or not. As we begin the 3rd year of NASH Tsunami, it's great to look back at how far we've come, to thank Stephen for his exceptional contributions to date and continued involvement going forward, and to welcome Jörn to his every week role. If you have a minute, go get your coffee and play the Stephen Harrison drinking game yourself before you tap into the conversation. Then sit back, listen, enjoy, learn, and when you're done, join the dialogue on our LinkedIn and Facebook discussion groups. This is a very special week here at Surfing the NASH Tsunami for a variety of reasons. As those of you who read your LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, or your emails from us know by now, this week is the 2nd anniversary of this podcast. We recorded 2 years ago this week and dropped the episode 2 years ago on what would be Friday. And we thought we were going to do 4 episodes and maybe a couple of people would listen and Stephen would have tape he could take around to some drug companies. And 2 years later, here we are. These numbers are pretty staggering. 126 episodes, 335 postings. 58,000 downloads, 105 countries. We mentioned those in the announcement. There are a couple of others. In addition to Stephen, Louise, and I, who served as the primary co-host, we've had 54 other panelists. We've covered 11 major events. And my trivia question for the day, for those of you who are listening live or otherwise, if you include Stephen, Louise, and me, before today, how many people have had their names announced as part of the podcast before we get to today's guest statement, since we started the podcast? And when you hear this on the podcast, but not live today, you will hear the Beatles singing Happy Birthday in the background because that tells you how old I am. So in the honor of 2nd anniversary, we have a lot of really exciting news. First of all, we'd like to announce the formation of SurfingTheNASH.com, a new company, a partnership of HepDynamics LLC, which is my company, and HGTM LLC, company owned by Stephen. And we are creating SurfingTheNASH.com as a separate company, taking control of this podcast and dedicated to creating audio and visual programming and social media to keep putting the biggest dent possible on fatty liver disease. We figure we've taken a couple of kicks to the can so far, but nothing compared to what we're going to do now that we can really get started. So that's number 1, and I can't tell you how excited I am that we're doing this. Stephen can talk about it in a minute. I'm just going to keep going because if I don't, I'll probably start choking up. I'm way too emotional for my own good sometimes. Second, as we discussed, Surfing the NASH is looking not only to continue the tsunami, but to start a whole set of audio and video programs to educate different stakeholders about NASH and NAFLD, looking from their points of view, their countries, their specialties, their issues, their everything, and helping to activate them to make diagnosis, treatment, and monitoring a larger part of their daily lives, including patients. Over time, we think this will include not only hepatologists, but every specialty that touches metabolic disease, allied health professionals, patients, maybe even payers. Last week, I announced that we've signed an agreement to develop a 4-episode pilot series targeted at endocrinologists and others for whom treating patients with type 2 diabetes is a big part of their practice today. Next week, we're going to announce the series name and the date for the first episode, but I will tell you today, the first episode will launch sometime during the first half in May, probably on a Tuesday evening at 10 o'clock in the Eastern U.S. Still making sure whether it's Tuesday or Wednesday. If you are listening and you can think of a cool name with a surfing theme for a podcast about diabetes and NASH, send it on in. If we use it, I'll invite you on the podcast to talk about how you came up with it. And even if we don't use it, I intend to read all the names next week. Okay, moving on. In a Broadway show or TV series, the way they work is they do a pilot and then lead characters sign on for one season at a time. And fundamentally, that's what happened here, right? We did a 4-episode pilot. It did really well. We signed on for season 1. Stephen, I think, had planned to leave originally at the end of season 1, stayed on for season 2, and now we're to season 3. So, Stephen, would you like to take a minute and talk about your plans for season 3 and what podcast has been to date for you?
Stephen Harrison. Sure. First of all, let me say I'm very proud of Surfing the NASH Tsunami and where we've come. I mean, just thinking back to when this started in the middle of the pandemic, I remember sitting down with you and thinking about how we could continue to fill the void of news and information surrounding fatty liver without having EASL and AASLD and many of the other liver meetings. I think NASHTAG was the only one that continued in an in-person format throughout, in some form or fashion, throughout the whole pandemic. And it really hit me that there was this huge void in communicating data that we had gotten used to. And so we started the podcast, and very quickly Louise came on, part of that as well, Peter Traber at first, and then we kind of settled into a battle rhythm. We settled into a routine, and I remember we were told, somebody mentioned early on that after about 10 podcasts we would run out of things to talk about and it would just kind of go away.
It was Peter. He wasn't worried about how long he was going to stay on the podcast because it was going to run out before he ran out of commitment time.
That's right. And then it just kind of began to build steam, much like a locomotive, just kind of starting out with a chug, and then it began to pick up steam, and we rolled through year one, and then through year two. You mentioned all the countries that we're touching, all the downloads that have occurred. I love your comment a while back. You said, believe it or not, we're the #1 podcast in Macedonia or something. I mean, there was those little highlights that tended to just keep our energy going. And I think there's a big special thanks to you, to Louise, to all of the people that have joined the podcast and been huge in trying to elevate the podcast. 3 of them are on this podcast today. Mazen, Naim, Jörn. I think they've done more episodes than any other podcast member outside of the 3 of us, and Donna Cryer. Yeah. So again, I special thanks to you guys for taking your time, your effort, your energy. You're as busy as I am, and you'd come on the podcast routinely. And I just want to say thank you for that, and for the producers, for all the people that make the podcast go. I mean, it's amazing to take what we talk about today and then listen to it and see how it's transformed into this very professional, well-done diatribe of different things that we talk about. For me, moving forward, many of you know that I'm involved in lots of things centered around trying to find our first cure for NASH and driving the disease awareness campaign around NASH. And I want to continue to do that. But I'm going to take a step back and focus some energies in some other places. I'll still be a part of the podcast, maybe just not quite as often. I still want to try to make at least 50%, if not more, of each episode. So I'll still be around quite a bit. I'm so thankful to have Jörn stepping in the lurch here and filling that spot. He has been a huge supporter of the podcast. He brings lots of talent, lots of energy, enthusiasm, and passion, and a unique perspective that I think we all enjoy listening to, not to mention the German accent that helps, that's nice. That offsets Louise's English accent some. So anyway, I'm thrilled to still be a part of the podcast. I'm thrilled where it's come so far and can't wait to see where it's going in year 3 and beyond, as we really are a conduit for content delivery. You mentioned all the other bits and pieces of information that is going to come out as a spin-off of the podcast. I think those are terrific additional conversations that are going to be had. But maybe I'll just stop there and say thank you to everybody.
Stephen, first of all, we all want to say thank you as well. And I'd like to invite everybody to say thank you at 2 levels. Number 1 is just say thank you and to talk about what this podcast and your role has meant to them so far. But second, Mike Wilson, our audio engineer, came up with this really cool idea called the Stephen Harrison drinking game, which is there are things that you just say a lot. Now, because this is NASH, the drinking game has to be done, as Naim would remind us, with black coffee, with non-dairy milk if you need a sweetener. Yeah, that would be one of them. Hashtag real talk. That's right. So it's a drinking game with black coffee, a non-dairy sweetener, a non-dairy milk if you need that, and a friendly glycemic index sweetener like agave. So every time Stephen says any one of the things that we're about to note, if you're listening or if you're on, you're obligated to have a drink of coffee. With that, brave one, go first, just to say thanks and talk about what this podcast has meant to you and Stephen's role has meant, and then share with us a drinking game item.
Louise Campbell.
I'm going to jump in first.
I just love all of these ones, and I want to get it in first. Keep it simple, stupid. I just love it. I think it is the mantra of really explaining things to patients and other physicians and other nurses. So it comes across that entire set. So for me, keep it simple, stupid is one that I will always take with me. And I think my other thing is, despite not ever meeting you, I consider you a friend. And you're not getting out the deep fried turkey.
Oh, no. No doubt. Yeah, keep it simple, stupid. KISS principle. That takes me all the way back to when I was a second lieutenant in the Army. I was told very early on to, don't make it complicated. Keep it simple.
And healthcare has become way too complicated, so we need to rein it back a little bit and keep it simple.
That's right.
Naim Alkhouri.
I guess I'll go next. Well, first, happy anniversary and congratulations on all what you've accomplished. This is really amazing. This podcast has been really important for us in the field. I mean, there are deep discussions that go into non-invasive tests and endpoints for clinical trials and regulatory issues and pathology issues, and you're making an impact for all of us, and it's a platform for us to have these honest discussions about things that we think about, we talk about, and sometimes we don't even have the data yet to support it, but it generates a lot of thinking, and sometimes it's the way we start research projects. I've been listening to this for the last year and a half or so religiously, and congratulations. For Stephen, I guess for me it's is the juice worth the squeeze. This is the classic Stephen saying, and I think it's really important in the NAFLD field because it's a multifactorial disease. There's so much going on, and you need to always think about this. Whatever you're trying to do, is it worth it? Is it going to lead to moving the field forward? And this is one thing I learned from Stephen. So always, think, whatever you're doing, is it worth it? Is it going to change the field for the better?
Excellent. Maz, you want to go next?
Mazen Noureddin.
Sure, sir. And just want to comment on the drink first. Rather than coffee, can we make it Irish coffee since I'm in a vacation mode?
You can do that, and your liver will attest to itself. It's fine.
Well, the first time I don't remember how I came across the show, but I do remember the first episode I listened to it. I think it was during a conference or something that I missed, and I just downloaded the thing and I listened. I'm like, this is awesome. If you miss anything, you will get this. It will tell you what happened. It will analyze it, and you will get experts in the field talking about it. I think that was an episode where Peter Traber and someone from the FDA were on. I think that was probably my first episode listening to it. And since that, I came on. I enjoyed the discussions, as Naim mentioned. I enjoyed the challenge. I enjoyed moving the field forward. And I also enjoyed the social aspect of it, that you, Roger, do a great job. I mean, I got to know a lot of my colleagues, their children, what do they do, what do they eat, what do they drink. So the NASH world become like just one small world. Let me shift to Stephen. Where do I start? Well, the first thing crossed to mind, and I think he has said it on the show, and he and I are friends now. He gives you this certain military sentence that is as following. Well, we're gonna get it done. And sure, things have gotten done in the last 2 years, in the show and outside the show in the field, because Stephen and his vision and actions. So we're gonna get it done.
Get her done. No doubt.
Which what we're going to talk about also today, the NAIL-NIT that is going to get it done.
Amen.
Absolutely.
So, Mazen, first of all, to be honest, thanks so much for doing this from vacation. The fact that you wanted to be on this episode and you happen to be on vacation doesn't in any way lessen the fact that you're doing it from Spain.
And I missed a Michelin-listed restaurant with my family. So that's how much I love you, Roger and Stephen.
Wow.
And you know what? We'd be a lot more impressed if it wasn't 3:45 in the morning where Louise is right now, but it's very
That's
impressive.
true. I have to give her that.
Very impressive.
Thank you.
Okay.
But you would never know that it's 4:15. She looks just as chipper and as dapper as ever.
Yeah, she does. She looks fantastic. Jörn, I'm going to let you go last. I'm going to go next, in part because I really like the one I've got for Stephen, and in part because you should have the floor for a couple of minutes, my friend. Stephen, first of all, I've said this before, but I'll say it again, an exceptional debt of personal gratitude. I was kind of wandering around at a point in my life trying to figure out what was I going to do next that had meaning and had impact, and bumped into you at hashtag 2019, and you started talking about making big fat dent and fatty liver disease, and it just resonated. Took us a year to figure out what to do, and then it wound up being a lot more and a little different than than what we had in mind, but here we are. And I had forgotten how much fun work could be until this thing really took off. So I owe you an exceptional debt of gratitude for that. I've said that before on this podcast. I've said it privately. I'll say it again. Everybody that does this is infused with your spirit, although we're going to have to decide who takes on the role of commenting on the furniture in people's houses when we see them. I mean, Manal is moving to Minnesota. She's going to have a whole new house for someone to comment on. So you're going to have to show up when she's on so that you can talk about her furniture. I don't know anybody else who could do it justice.
Sure, absolutely.
Here's my Harrisonism. I think it speaks to the ambition that is in front of us as well as where we are right now, which is we are flying a Wright brothers plane when what we really need is a fifth-generation strike fighter, right? And I think that gets NASH in a nutshell.
NASH and NITs and all of it, right?
Fatty liver in the broadest sense. I think that totally captures it. So that'll be mine. So the reason I wanted to let Jörn go last is that Jörn will have the thoroughly enjoyable, but in some ways not entirely enviable task of sliding into Stephen's chair. And I've been describing him for a while as the fifth Beatle. We're dropping the fifth. And Jörn, starting this week, will be a permanent member of the podcast. Stephen will be with us. The target is half the time, maybe a little more if we can pull that off. Probably more of these other two gentlemen and some other folks who have been with us. But Jörn, my friend, for the first time as like the official key opinion leader of the podcast, the floor is yours. Talk to Stephen, talk to us. Have at it.
Well,
Jörn Schattenberg.
thanks, Roger. And clearly, I'm not taking Stephen's chair. Wouldn't make me comfortable sitting in it. So I'll pull in my chair, and I'm happy to join you guys in this. It's been really a tremendous pleasure listening to the podcast. I said that before I started out running, and kind of like Mazen stumbled across, I think it was the Complete Response letter, where I thought, hey, I work on this. What are they talking about? And just got glued on and stuck with the podcast. And I'm happy every time I can come on. And now that you invited me to join on a weekly basis, even more exciting to see friends and discuss this. And I'm 100% certain that it will carry forward even if face-to-face meetings are coming back up, because it covers so much more content, depth, different perspectives, all the type of information you don't get during a regular short meeting. Looping this back to Stephen and you, and kudos for what you've created here. It's year 3 kicking off, really tremendous effort. There are many things I could say about Stephen. I tremendously enjoy the energy you bring into this podcast, Stephen. It's beneficial for the field and the things we talk about. So it's been a big joy and pleasure joining you here. And I'll be looking forward to you taking the seat, because it's not taken up by me. Plan to bring in my own perspective, a little bit European, German thoughts, as a clinician scientist from this side of the world. Clearly, what's interesting me most is, of course, the end-stage liver disease patients, because they're real and they're in urgent need of some sort of therapy and NITs. And I guess my Harrisonism in this context is the shriek and peak. It's not cancer, but it's something very surprising, and nobody would have thought this person has cirrhosis, and here it is. Stephen Harrison would have probably told you before, but nobody looks at it. So I think it's a quote that says a lot about the disease, and that's why I like it.
You're bringing your chair, sitting in my chair, whatever you want to call it. I think you've always brought a nice perspective, a fresh perspective, one that is steeped in wisdom and knowledge. And whether I hear you on the Litmus Consortium, or whether I hear you as a panel discussant at a scientific advisory board, or we're doing a satellite symposium together, or you're giving a lecture at AASLD, EASL, or NASH-TAG, or any one of the other venues that you and I happen to be at together, I always learn something from you and like your perspective. Same thing goes for Naim and Mazen as well. We're only as good as the collective we. Each of us brings something unique to the table, but together we're much more powerful, and our voice resonates much louder when we speak collectively. And I think we all do a great job of that. So the best days of the podcast lie ahead.
I do believe that. And as we turn to NAIL-NIT, I just want to go back to Jörn's comments for 1 second, which is, Jörn, I've actually had the experience of watching Stephen do a peek and shriek.
On which occasion was that?
Right before the pandemic, I brought some folks from Sonic Insights down to San Antonio to meet Stephen, and I was the guinea pig. When whoever it was put the fiber scan on me, I've got very large rib cage. Stephen, turning slightly green, looked at me and said, has anyone ever told you that you might need a liver transplant? And I said, no, I just have big ribs, try it again. And in fact, it turned out I just had big ribs, try it again. But for that one moment, I watched a little bit of green tinge in his face, and I said, I'd never heard the expression peek and shriek, but every time I hear it now, my mind goes to that one moment and your face.
So moving forward, the one phrase that I like to use that I think is apropos as we try to find cures for fatty liver, find non-invasive tests to define the 3 different contexts of use that we focus on, is we want to take a broken piece and make a masterpiece. And I think that's really what we're all about. All of us are driving toward forward that same paradigm. And the people that are listening today, they all want the same thing or they wouldn't be listening. So that's how I'll end the little segment on Harrisonisms, taking a broken piece and making a masterpiece.
And now, back to Roger.
We hope you've enjoyed this recording. If you have any questions or comments about the content of this conversation or the entire episode, please send an email to questions@surfingnash.com. We'll be back next week to learn a little more about our new full-time co-host, Jörn, and to check in with a couple of our favorite guest surfers. Until then, stay safe, surf on. We'll see you on the podcast. Bye-bye now.